episode number 191 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. My guest today is Charlotte Grand. Charlotte is a registered nutritional therapist, fertility nutrition expert, author and creator of the popular Instagram channel, The Fertility Kitchen, where she shares her wholesome, balanced approach alongside deliciously simple, everyday recipes backed by science. Charlotte has spent almost 10 years specializing in preconception and fertility, and in her private practice supports her clients to transform their health in preparation for conception and pregnancy. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. Welcome to the podcast, Charlotte.
Thank you so much.
So we were just having a pre-talk conversation for all the listeners about her really cool Instagram channel where she shares a lot of fertility, nutrition, and recipes. And I'm definitely excited to find out more about you. And you had mentioned your background. So let's start with that. Let's start with what your background is and how you got interested in fertility, specifically nutrition.
So I guess it all stems from my own fertility journey. So did you want to hear a bit about that?
Yes, would love to.
It stems from my own fertility journey. Kind of that's what got me to where I am today. Mm-hmm. And I guess it's like a lot of people who work in the fertility space is that we had a struggle ourselves. So I have two boys who are IVF miracles, and they are 7 and 10 now. So it was quite a long time ago, my journey. Mm-hmm. And not long after my husband and I got married, we started trying for a baby. And like most of us, we just assumed it would happen immediately. Mm-hmm. You know, very naively, just didn't think it would take any time at all. And I had no reason to think it would because we were both young, fit and healthy. I had a textbook cycle, but it didn't happen. And so we tried for a few months, and then I went to see my doctor. Mm-hmm. And I think we were probably sent away to try, to carry on trying. And then we went back with no luck still and had all the sort of preliminary tests that they offer. So over here, they test your hormones and they do a semen analysis. And if that's all good, then you have to go for a hysteroscopy. Mm-hmm. And they check your tubes to make sure that they're clear. Mm-hmm. So I had all of that done and everything was normal. And during this time as well, we were still trying, and we kept thinking that it would happen. And nurses, like after you get your tubes flushed, they're like, oh, loads of people get pregnant after this. So we thought, oh, that'll be us. And of course it wasn't. And eventually we were referred for IVF and we were diagnosed with unexplained infertility. Mm-hmm. And that was like quite a big shock because I hadn't thought that IVF would be the first thing that we got offered. Mm-hmm. I thought that maybe IUI would be something that we could try first. So it was a bit of a shock and a bit, I felt quite sad that was where we were at, but we decided to sort of go for it. But in the meantime, I'd kind of started to investigate how I could support myself, because I'm someone who likes to sort of take action. I don't like things just to sort of happen to me. I like to be able to do something as well. Right. So at the time I was working as a fashion buyer and I was in quite a stressful job. So long hours and high stress. Mm-hmm. So the first thing I went and did was have acupuncture treatment. And I feel like that's a bit of a rite of passage on your TTC journey because you all go for the acupuncture. And it was for stress as much as anything. So because of the full-on job, I thought, it might help with the stress levels. And I wanted to also hopefully have it help with fertility. Mm-hmm. And it was, cutting a long story short, the effects of acupuncture for me were so profound that I ended up deciding to retrain as an acupuncturist. And that came after lots and lots of treatments. So I had weekly treatment for a long time. Mm-hmm. And it was just incredible, the effects that I just wasn't expecting. I just felt like a much greater sense of well-being from having acupuncture. I had more of a sort of spring in my step.
Yes.
But also I had, and again, this is something that now I would probably see as something to investigate, but at the time, because you're told that everything's normal. So I used to have incredibly painful periods, and every month I'd be doubled up in pain and having to take Nurofen and sort of paracetamol and things. And the next period I had, so after having maybe 2 or 3 acupuncture treatments, the next period was completely pain-free. And I think that was a bit of a revelation, really.
Yeah, it is amazing.
It's so amazing. And it was something that I just wasn't expecting, because, my acupuncturist didn't even, he'd asked me about the pain, like my periods and what they were like. But he never said, oh, this could help with the pain. So the fact that it then, out of the blue, I had a period and it wasn't painful was quite shocking. And actually, since then, I've never had one painful period. I know. So that was like a bit of a clincher, in the sense that I then wanted to know anything and everything about Chinese medicine, because I just thought, how can someone sticking needles in me have this effect?
Right.
And I know. And so and my acupuncturist was great. He was very encouraging, and he lent me loads of books. And actually, where I was working at the time, there was the acupuncture college was in the town that I was working in. And he was like, oh, well, why don't you just come along to the open evening for the course? Just, out of interest, really. So I did. And then from that, I ended up applying and ended up enrolling on the course.
Yeah.
And it was a degree, but because I wasn't sure where it was going, I carried on with my job as well. So for the first year of my studies, I did my full-time job plus the acupuncture training.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's a real lot, yeah. And also I was navigating fertility issues as well.
Oh yeah.
So it was a lot. But after the first year, I knew that I knew I enjoyed it, and I wanted to really focus on my studies. So I decided to leave my job, which again was quite a big deal, really. And I left my job so that I could focus on studying, but also we were soon to be embarking on IVF as well. So it allowed me the time to really focus on sort of upgrading my lifestyle, because I didn't want to be stressed anymore, and I wanted the time to sort of exercise and things like that. So I did that. I left my job. So for the second year of my course, I was going through fertility treatment, and the kind of things that I did to support myself. So I was having acupuncture regularly. I was going out for walks daily. We got a dog as well. So we've got a fur baby, and I walked her every day. I started keeping a gratitude journal, which was amazing, because
it is amazing.
It's so amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It just really changes your mindset, doesn't it?
It does.
And it enabled me to sort of recognize that even though I was navigating challenging times, there was still so much in my life to be grateful for. And that was great. And I did that throughout IVF as well. So I think what I did was every day I wrote down 3 things that I was grateful for. And it was, not massive things. It was like, oh, I'm so happy and grateful that the sun was shining today and I was able to go out for a nice walk, or my husband bought me a cup of tea in bed, or something like that. So it's very simple things, but it just helps to shift your mindset, even when things are tough. And then I also started prioritizing my sleep, and I began looking at my nutrition, but I wasn't massively, I've always been interested in it, but I didn't really think my diet was a problem. So I started to just add stuff in. So I created my first recipe, which was an IVF smoothie, and that was really protein rich. And, I wanted it to help me grow the eggs during IVF. And so we went through our first IVF cycle, and we were very fortunate, and it was successful. That's great. Thank you. And we had George, who's 10 now. So he was my first IVF miracle. Yeah. And when I was pregnant with him, I carried on with acupuncture studies, actually. And the sort of timings was very fortunate, because I did my 3rd year of my course with him, with being pregnant. And then he was born something like 4 or 5 days after my last exam.
Oh, wow.
So I know, between years. So
Yeah.
it was really good. And then I had a few weeks off before I then went back. And again, I have a very supportive husband. So when I went back to carry on with my studies, George would never take a bottle. So my husband would bring him in to college like 3 times a day so that I could breastfeed him.
Wow. Oh, how
I know.
lucky. Isn't it great when you have a really good husband?
Yeah, I know. It is incredible. And everyone was like, couldn't believe it. But yeah, he was amazing. And so had George, and then not long after I had him, I think I went into clinic maybe when he was about a year. So we do 6 months of clinic. And then I knew as well from the beginning that I wanted to specialize in fertility because obviously of my own journey.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as I qualified, I set up my fertility acupuncture clinic. And that was back in 2013. So it's quite a long time ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, so then I think we started then preparing to try for a sibling. And we started trying quite quickly because of our fertility issues. We just didn't know how long it was going to take. So I think when George was about 9 months old, we started trying.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we might have tried for about a year, again, naturally, and nothing was happening. And I think during this time, I'd started to think about diet because from working with my own clients, it sort of naturally led to an interest in nutrition. And obviously, like when you do train as an acupuncturist, we got taught about Chinese medicine, food, energetics. So I'd started to sort of get interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
And then also just noticing that acupuncture could only do so much of my clients because if they were going away and still eating in the same way, or they were still super stressed, then acupuncture would help them. But there was another piece to the puzzle.
Right.
And so I thought that piece was nutrition. And so I started to reflect on my sort of diet as well, and what else I could do to support my own fertility. And I think the first thing I did was cut out sugar from my diet because I was a right sugar monster. And
we all are at one point. That's why I laugh. Because it's like
honestly,
you think it's going to be forever that you feel the suffering without it. And I think that that's the key, that it's not going to last forever. But yeah, it's totally an addiction.
it is, and it's so hard. And even now, I don't eat much sugar, but sometimes it catches you, doesn't it? And you find yourself, it's slowly creeping up your intake, and then you think, no, I've got to sort of nip this in the bud, really. But yeah, so it was sugar, and I did this program, I Quit Sugar, it was called, which was like an 8-week program, and completely stopped having sugar and felt really good. So my diet before was standard kind of Western diet. So although I was, slim and people always viewed me as being very healthy, I would have things like cereal for breakfast, and then I don't know, a chocolate bar mid-morning, and then I'd have a sandwich for lunch and a cookie or something, and then in the evening it's pasta. So it was very, very high sugar, really, the diet. So that had an impact. I just felt better in terms of energy and mood and things like that.
That's great.
Yeah, and so that was the only thing we did. And then we had IVF again. So I hadn't really massively got into nutrition at this point. And we conceived Alex. And Alex has now just turned 7. And then when I was pregnant with him, that's when I started to think more and more about nutrition. And in fact, it must have been when he was born, because I think he was a couple of months old, and I gave up dairy. And I was just sort of experimenting with different things at this point. And I gave up dairy. And then like a few weeks later, or no, it was a couple of months actually, I noticed that I wasn't having asthma anymore.
Oh,
and
wow.
Yeah, and I'd had asthma since I was like 5 or something. So I'd had it a long time. I was taking an inhaler every day, and I was just used to being wheezy all the time. And this is a key thing actually to point out, is that it wasn't an overnight thing. And I think sometimes when people experiment with removing things from their diet, they expect it to be an overnight thing. And if 100%. They do it, or if they do it, and you do it for a couple of weeks, and then you go, oh no, that's not a problem for me. And actually, if I'd have introduced dairy again in a couple of weeks, then I would never have known that it was the effect that it had on me.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was about 3 months later that I suddenly said to my husband, oh my God, I haven't taken my inhaler for ages. And that was such a light bulb moment
Yeah.
where I was like, wow, nutrition is really powerful. And it felt like such a food as medicine kind of, I suppose, a bit of a cliche, but that's, it was just like, this is incredible
But it's
stuff.
so true. It's so true. It really is. And food has, like you said, energetics. It has chi. And
Mm,
some actually drains your chi, and then others really support your chi, your energy,
yeah,
your vitality.
exactly. And so I wanted more then. I was like, this is so interesting.
Hmm.
And so Alex, again, I think I remember putting him in a little baby sling and heading to London to look around nutrition colleges because I'm a glutton for punishment. So we then, when he was about 4 months old, I think I must have enrolled on a 3-year nutrition course.
Hmm.
And so I did that. And I guess then one day, I think I was feeding him in the middle of the night, and I started to think about what I would have really wanted on my fertility journey and what would have been helpful. Because when I was trying to get pregnant, I did read lots of nutrition books, but they were
Hmm.
quite sort of boring and dry. So,
Hmm.
very texty paperback books that really told you what nutrients you needed, but never how that translated into real life, really, and how that translated into a plate of food, and how you would manage to sort of cook it and do it on a daily basis. And
Right.
so,
It's almost like the practicality aspect.
yeah, exactly, the sort of taking action. And I was reflecting also on what some of my clients had been saying about how they weren't very happy with the nutrition advice available. And I thought, you know what, I would have loved a fertility nutrition cookbook that gave me the information and educated me, but then
Yeah.
also showed me how that practically translated into recipes and food, and how I could, you know, follow that advice on a daily basis.
Right.
And into my head popped the fertility kitchen, and I just thought, wow, that is an epic name for a cookbook for fertility. And
Hmm.
so that was it. And so I was training to be a nutritionist, because also I thought, if I do want to educate people about nutrition, I need to be credible, I need to know my stuff. And so whilst I was doing that, I set up my Instagram account and just started creating recipes and sharing them, really. And that was great, because I am quite a creative person, and
Hmm.
I'd really missed that from my being a fashion buyer.
Right.
I missed that creative side. So I started photographing recipes and uploading them to Insta and stuff. And it was like a renewed passion, really. And I was able to then, bring together my passion for kind of empowering other women on their journey so that they can have it a little bit easier than I did. And, with my creative sort of instincts as well. So that's kind of really brought me where I am today. So ever since that idea popped into my head, I've literally been working towards the goal of this cookbook, which is now going to be published this week, actually, in the UK.
That's so exciting. Congratulations, first of all, because that's a huge, huge accomplishment. I know it
Thank you
takes a lot to really get that together.
so much. Yeah, and it's been very enlightening as well, just the whole process of bringing something like this into the world. So I a couple of years ago, I felt like I was in a position where I knew enough. I had a decent following on Instagram. And so I thought, right, now's the time to kind of approach an agent. And yeah, it all happened. It all just seemed to be the right time. I got an agent straight away. And then after a few months, we got a publishing deal. And then it's really been a 2-year process to bring that book, to write the book, and then write all the recipes and test them, and
Hmm.
have the photo shoot and editing and all of that. It's taken a long time, actually. So it's very exciting that it's just around the corner.
That's awesome. I mean, I love your Instagram, by the way. You guys definitely have to check it out. And I'm looking at the rainbow pad thai. It looks like you have so many different things and so much variety. And I think that that's huge. That's a big thing because people tend to get into this habit of just certain types of foods and having that variety.
Yeah,
supportive.
definitely having the variety, eating a rainbow is really important. And again, that's something that people find challenging because maybe they don't like vegetables or they've had them in a certain way as a child and they're not really keen. And so I'm really about maximizing flavor and showing you that vegetables can be delicious, and introducing new ways to have them using different sort of homemade dressings and things like that. But also at the sort of core of it is it being quick and easy. That's really
Yes,
important.
that is huge for sure.
So important. Exactly, because I'm someone who really put a lot of effort in, so I don't mind dishes taking me a while. And
Right.
actually it's been a bit of a learning curve as well, just writing these recipes. And like, so sometimes I've gone, right, I'm going to make, suggesting the recipe that they get all these different herbs like spices and then put them all in a pestle and mortar and bash them up. And then I thought, you know what, no one's got the time to do that.
Yeah.
And like, I will do it because I know that when you do bash up the spices yourself, obviously the flavor's a bit more pungent and things like that, but who's got that kind of time? So then I made sure that I instead went for ground spices that people just quickly mix together and things like that. And so it's important for me that it's quick, it's easy, that people can do it. They don't have to spend hours in the kitchen.
That's great. And so how, like for this recipe book, how long does it usually take on average to make some of that? I know there's definitely a range, but
Yeah.
generally speaking.
Well, I'd say the prep is probably the thing that's going to take the longest with my recipes because we're using fresh ingredients. It's lots of veggies, so often it's chopping them all up, and that does take a bit of time. But
Right.
I've been doing Instagram live cook-alongs with different people, and most of the recipes are taking less than half an hour, so around about half an hour, I would say.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a decent amount. Like, that's the amount of time that people probably will invest on a weekday, maybe when they're busy. Then 20 to 30 minutes really is going to be the top that you'd want to be spending, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
um but and also it's like things like chopping and stuff. So for food photography, obviously you have to make things look as pretty as possible because people need to want to eat the food.
Yeah.
But when you're cooking for yourself, and I think I said this on an Instagram live last week that I did, I think we made that rainbow pad thai actually. And I said, look, when you make this for yourself at home, just put all of your ingredients through if you've got a food processor with a grater attachment, and this is what I do at home, is I just put it all through the food processor. So it just chops it up, and it's super quick. It doesn't take long at all. Whereas if I'm making it for photography to photograph it, then I will, I don't know, julienne the carrots and do different things to make it look appealing. But at home, I just, grate it all or quickly do something with the food processor, because that's going to cut your prep time down as well. And some people will buy ready chopped ingredients as well, which is useful. Okay, it's more expensive sometimes, but it's useful to know that you can do that if you're time poor. That
Right.
you can buy ready prepped ingredients. Then sometimes you just got to do it.
Yeah, it's true. So it really depends what's more important. Is it the money? Is it the time? And then you kind of
Yeah.
figure out what would work out. But it's for sure that's something that you don't want to skimp on is your nutrition.
No, exactly. And you will have, if you want to eat well, and I think people come across my account and who are looking to support themselves, they will spend a little bit more time and money because it is an investment, isn't it? But for me as well, it's not just an investment in your fertility, it's an investment in the health of your child, and also
Absolutely.
long-term health as well, so for your future.
Yeah.
And I know it is a bit of a trigger sometimes for people who are still trying to conceive, or if someone's in the midst of infertility, to hear someone else sort of say, oh, I feel a bit blessed by my fertility journey. It can be a bit triggering, but and I know I'm fortunate I can say that because I'm on the other side of it. But I really do feel fortunate because I was able to learn fairly early on in my life that my diet wasn't really the best, and I've been able to invest in my health and really prioritize my health, and hopefully that will stand me in good stead for the future, and for nourishing my children as well.
Absolutely. And it's something that, as professionals that work with a lot of people trying to conceive, we see this a lot. This is what you're saying right now, I hear a lot. And I hear it also from people who haven't yet conceived. They say, if
Yeah.
nothing else, I feel so much better. Just,
Yeah.
I've changed so much and I've done so much. It's like a magnifying glass, anything really. Sometimes it just makes us stop and think, okay, what can we do to make ourselves feel better?
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. It's about taking ownership, isn't it?
Yeah.
And sort of optimizing your health. And yeah, it makes you feel better. And and that's the thing. Fertility was my thing, but for someone else, because I another thing I hear from clients and that they say, oh, it's not fair that I've got to do all of this
Hmm.
because so and so got pregnant and she's not very healthy and drinks a lot or whatever. And it's like, yeah, but she'll probably have something else to deal with.
Yeah.
This fertility's sort of been my thing, it's your thing, but maybe that person will have to deal with diabetes or something. So
Good point.
it's it's just our thing, and it's the cards that we've been dealt, isn't it? And
Yeah.
I guess changing your mindset and looking at it more positively, whereas it's an opportunity to learn how to nourish my body and support my health is a positive thing.
Yeah, it really it can be. It absolutely can be, and it's something that you learn so much. And I'll tell you the truth. Sometimes people who hesitate on cooking and they see it as a chore up front, and I as well.
Mm.
I'm in that category that I really saw it as a chore. Now I'm starting to strategize, or I'm learning to, and teaching it at the same time. Strategize a week in advance. I see that you have like those week plans. You just kind of create a strategy, get everything in place. It's actually fun. You look forward to different meals and different tastes and really spicing up your life. I mean, it literally spices up your life when you start to cook more and make it an art because it can be actually a lot more fun than people think.
Yeah, and also view it as self-care as well.
Yeah.
I think if you think about this is about nourishing yourself, then hopefully that could be a motivator. But it is fun, and you can put some music on, and it doesn't matter. Like if you mess up a recipe, it
Right.
doesn't matter,
It
does
doesn't
it?
matter.
And
It's
I
correct.
think, yeah, and I think that's something like sometimes people are a bit scared in the kitchen, or they don't feel like they know how to cook. And well, maybe pick one recipe and master that, and then next week pick a different recipe and master that. And before you know
Yeah.
it, you will have a load of recipes that you really enjoy making. And the more you make them, then you can start adding your own touches to them as well, because you start to think, well, I really like this ingredient and I'm not so keen on that one. So you can start to make the recipe your own as well.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. And so, if there are certain staples that you would recommend people consider having at all times, because there are definitely certain things that are really beneficial for fertility health and also
Yeah.
hormone balance, like fats, and there's certain things that are really important. What
Hmm.
would those be?
Well, I think it's important to have eggs if you like eggs and you can tolerate them, because some people are sort of allergic to eggs. But if you can tolerate them, then they're a great thing to have because they're a source of complete protein. They've got
Hmm.
lots of nutrients that are really beneficial, the yolks in particular. So you definitely want to make sure that you're eating the yolks, because you'll get your protein obviously from the whites. And in the yolks, you've got choline, for example, which is a really important nutrient that doesn't get a lot of airtime, really.
Hmm.
And it's sort of goes hand in hand with folate in that it helps to prevent neural tube defects, and it also helps with placenta function as well.
Hmm.
And it's an important part of methylation, which is a function in the body. And so eggs are really key. And the good thing about eggs is that you can rustle up a meal with them so
Hmm.
quickly.
Yeah,
you know
definitely.
Sometimes, yeah, if you haven't got anything but you've got an eggs and you've got maybe a few different veggies, you can just quickly stir fry some veggies, crack in a couple of eggs and scramble them, and that's a really nice healthy meal. So definitely eggs.
Hmm.
I would say if you've got like vegetables are super important. I think the dark green leafy veg
Hmm.
are probably the best, I guess, if you had to pick one colour, because they've got lots of really beneficial nutrients in them. And you can do a lot with them as well. So you can stir fry them, you can scramble them into eggs, like I was just saying. You can, what else can you do? Put them in a smoothie. So that's a good way if you're not massively keen on them. And I think it's quite good with those to add some punchy flavours, because sometimes people don't really like kale, for example, because it's quite bitter. And so if you add some chili flakes and saute it and, you know, chop it up and wilt it down and add some flavour, then they are really delicious. Kale is good because it's a cruciferous vegetable, and it will be quite supportive for liver, so for your liver function. So cruciferous vegetables contain nutrients that help support one of the phases of detoxification. So one of the phases of your liver.
So it's good for estrogen dominance and things like that, just to cleanse out.
That's right, yeah. And exactly. So it helps you to clear estrogen from your body. And it's also got folate in it, which we know is important for fertility and pregnancy.
Yeah, I love kale.
Yeah. And there's other kale as well. So there's black kale, Cavolo Nero, which is also really nice. And that's another thing to try. So I think it's quite handy to know that there's different varieties. So for example, you've got different varieties of kale and with other veggies. So if you really like carrots, for example, then maybe try purple carrots, you know, different rainbow carrots. The same with sweet potato. You can get purple sweet potato. With broccoli, you've got purple sprouting broccoli as well. You've got the tender stem broccoli. With cauliflower, you've got the Romanesco. So you've got lots of different varieties as well, and that will just help bring some more variety into your diet, because I think it's easy to get stuck in a rut with vegetables, isn't it, where you just you use the same ones day in, day out. And so a good way is just to try the different varieties of the same vegetable, because at least that will bring slightly different nutrition to you.
For sure.
That's something to be mindful of as well. It's like eating different colors, eating the rainbow. You've probably heard that. And that's a good principle to sort of follow, because it gives you a diverse range of nutrients and lots of antioxidants, which is really important for egg cell development and for sperm cells as well. The antioxidants, I'd say that's one of the top things that you can do nutrition wise, is to start eating a rainbow of vegetables every day. And for health in general, for our gut health as well, it's really important for fiber.
Yes.
And then other things that you might like to make sure that you've got. So liver is another one that lots of people don't really like, and they don't like, you know, if I recommend liver, it's especially good, like say if you have very heavy periods, then liver is an excellent source of iron. And it's very nutrient rich. So it's got, I think gram for gram, it has more nutrients than any other food. And I think it's been dubbed nature's multivitamin because it's got so many nutrients in it. It's very nutrient rich.
Yeah, it's incredible.
If you don't like the idea of liver, which a lot of people don't, then you can hide it in other foods. So bolognese type foods and curries and sort of that kind of thing, and burgers. If you make homemade burgers, then those are foods that lend themselves well to sort of hiding liver in. And what I tend to do is freeze it, and then when it's frozen, because you know liver's quite soft. It's quite hard to sort of handle. So if you put it in the freezer, and then when it's frozen, just grate it, and then you can put that into one of your other meals, so you can stir it.
Smart. That's a great idea. Or sometimes even liver pills, I say, you know, if you really can't stomach it.
Absolutely, yeah, because it is one that you kind of, I find people fall into two camps, that they're either willing to give it a go, and some people actually like it, liver, or you've got another camp of people who are just like, no freaking way.
No, I literally could see it when I mention it, and I see the person across from me, the face that they make. I'm like, okay,
yeah, exactly.
It's a liver pill.
Exactly. So yeah, desiccated liver, and if you're going to do that, just make sure that you get a good quality one that's organic and grass fed as well, and just making sure that, you know, because obviously the liver is where it's our detoxification organ. So that's why we want to go for organic and make sure that it's good quality.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that that's another misconception is people think because it's a detoxification organ that it has toxins in it.
Yes,
And
that's
that's
right.
not, it's just, it goes through it. It doesn't
Yeah.
store
No,
toxins.
it's like a filter, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but you still want to have good quality. Yeah, definitely.
Without a doubt. And also grass-fed, they've noted that with meats or any grass-fed beef, that it actually makes a lot less of an impact on inflammation
Mm,
than corn-fed beef.
yes. That's right. And because and that's that's part of my kind of food philosophy really, is know your sources and really pay attention to where your food is coming from, because there's a food writer in the UK and one of his sayings is, you are what you eat eats. And it's
Oh,
so
I
true.
like that.
Yeah, I know. And that's another reason. So with fish as well. So fish is really good for fertility. And over here though, you get a lot of farmed salmon, so factory farmed salmon.
Hmm. Yep.
And that has actually got a different composition to wild salmon, because wild salmon obviously lives its natural life. It swims far, and
Hmm.
it's very lean, and it has very lots of omega-3 fats, whereas the
Hmm.
farmed salmon is fattier because they are stuck in the farm, and it's a fattier fish that's more omega-6 than omega-3 fats.
Hmm.
And so like you said, with the beef, it's the same thing. You want to be making sure that you know what you're eating is eating, because grass is what cows are supposed to eat. They're not supposed to eat corn. And
Right.
so that will change the composition of the meat that you're eating as well.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think that that's where when people say, oh, cut out red meat because it causes inflammation, well, it's like you have to really observe and say, like, what kind of red meat, because it really does make a difference. And I think that then you kind of throw it all out and say, but the truth is, as we know, red meat could be really beneficial for blood
Mm,
building, and it is
yes.
something that is so important for fertility health.
Yeah, and then the final sort of store cupboard staple or fridge staple would be the oily fish. So, you know, things like wild Alaskan or sockeye salmon, Atlantic mackerel, herring, or rainbow trout. Over here, we get a lot of rainbow trout and sardines as well. So those oily fish are really important because they help to lower inflammation, and they contain the omega-3 fat DHA. And that's really important for a baby's brain development when you do get pregnant. And also it ticks so many other boxes as well, oily fish does, in terms of, it's got a lot of things that you don't get from other foods. So it's a rich source of vitamin B12. It's got choline, iodine, iron, selenium, and zinc as well, which are all important for both male and female fertility. So
Yeah.
I would say, that's another sort of superfood, and to be including that regularly. And I don't think we don't eat enough oily fish, really. I think
Yeah.
it's another one that you think, oh, I'm not sure about the taste. And a fishy tasting fish
Hmm.
tends to be oily fish. And what really makes a difference is if you buy as fresh as you can possibly buy, because what happens is, as the oils in the fish start to go rancid, that's when you start to get that really fishy smell and taste.
Mm.
And so the fresher the better, because that means that it's not going to taste really fishy. And then the other thing is just to, again, pair, if you're not a fan, just pair it with really bold flavors. So I think in my book I've got a tandoori salmon skewers, which are delicious, and I've got some
That sounds
Thai
great.
Thai salmon burgers. So it's adding those lovely bold flavors that just sort of takes the edge off that fishiness.
Yeah, that's great.
And I've just
And
remembered what I was going to say to you
yeah.
earlier about the beef, when we were talking about beef
Hmm.
and inflammation. I think as well, we need to think about that in the context of your overall diet as well. So like you said, what type of red meat are you eating? Is it fast food, burgers, which will be inflammatory? Or is it grass-fed red beef? Then that's not going to be as inflammatory, is it? Because you haven't got all of that other unfavorable sort of ingredients. And also in the context of what else are you eating as well. So if you've got a high sugar diet, there's definitely going to be more inflammation in your body. So
Right.
just thinking about the context of the diet as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had a question too. Every so often, as I'm sure you do as well, I get people who are vegan, like 100%
Mm,
vegan, and it definitely takes a lot more thought to go
yeah.
into like what you're going to eat to make up for, because it's just so much easier to get a
Yeah.
lot of the nutrients from animals.
Yeah.
So, as far as that goes, what are your thoughts on how to get around that? And I know that's a huge question, but like just if you can
I
kind of,
think,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, obviously, like we with animal foods, that is going to be the most nutrient dense,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to provide us with the most nutrition, and it's the easier for our bodies to extract that nutrition as well.
Mm-hmm.
So with a plant-based diet, it can be trickier just because plants have a lot of defense mechanisms to stop us from digesting them.
Mm-hmm.
And so some people really don't react well to things like legumes because they have anti-nutrients in them. So like if you notice that you get quite windy after having beans and legumes and things,
Mm-hmm.
then your body isn't necessarily breaking that down very well.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just another thing to think about with that diet.
Right.
And also that, I mean, like I wrote a course recently for optimizing IVF, and when I was looking at each stage of an IVF cycle, every food, like the foods that had every nutrient that you need, were animal foods, and so things like the oily fish was coming up time and time again. So, for every stage of the cycle, I was thinking, okay, what food would be good here? Oh, it's oily fish, and eggs were coming up a lot. So it's very difficult when you want to exclude all of those foods from your diet.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you've just got to very carefully plan your diet, if because lots of people obviously are very committed to that way of eating,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not for me to say that they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
So I just really work to support that person to make sure that they're really optimizing their diet. So they need to put a little bit more effort in terms of preparation. So when I was talking about those legumes earlier, I would recommend that they soak and sprout their legumes before they cook them,
Mm-hmm.
just to help improve the digestibility, because you want to get as much nutrition out of them as possible.
Right.
So I would recommend they do that with all kind of grains and legumes. And in terms of getting enough protein, it's just a case of making sure that they're taking on different types of protein, and they're making sure that they're having lots of different types of plant proteins at every meal.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's lots of sort of key nutrients that they need to be thinking about in terms of what they can't get. So there's some that are impossible to get, as we know from plant food. So things like vitamin B12 is difficult.
Mm-hmm. Choline
Um,
as well.
choline, yes, so the richest sources of choline are egg yolks and liver.
Mm-hmm.
Some plant foods do contain choline, so certain cruciferous vegetables do, but the concentration is so much less
Mm-hmm.
that it's very challenging to meet your needs. So that's where supplementation becomes important.
Right.
DHA as well. So DHA is what we get from oily fish,
Mm-hmm.
and the only kind of plant source of that is algae, which people just don't eat, do they?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then glycine is another one. So that's an amino acid that is really difficult. You can't get it. It's very much in animal food. So it's in things like collagen.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the bones and things. So if they're not eating animal foods, then really you're going to struggle to get enough.
Yeah.
And then you've got iron and zinc as well. So you can get those from plants, but it's much harder to absorb those nutrients from plants.
Mm-hmm.
And
Omega too.
yes, yeah. And also with iron, you've got heme iron and non-heme iron. So heme iron is what you'll get from animals, and non-heme is what you get from plants. But again, about over 95% of the iron in our bodies is in the form of heme iron. So, that's when you start to think, okay, so really you've got to focus on supplementing, and that's going to be fundamental in order to meet your needs for optimal fertility and also for pregnancy, because it's a very demanding time for your body.
Yeah.
And the other one is vitamin A as well, which we didn't talk about. So vitamin A, your body can convert beta carotene into vitamin A, but the conversion is very inefficient. So you definitely need to be making sure that your prenatal has both preformed vitamin A and beta carotene. And vitamin B12 as well. I don't know if we mentioned that one. Choline, so I would definitely supplement with that, with omega-3 fats, glycine, iron, zinc, and also vitamin K2. So those are the ones that I would really be making sure that I was getting supplements, maybe on top of my multivitamin, my prenatal supplement.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely one of those things that you could pull it off, but you just have to be very mindful of making sure
Yes.
that you're getting the right nutrients to support, because it really is like you're sprouting, your body sprouting, and you really need to nurture another being, really another growing being. So
yeah, you're building a whole new person from scratch. So
yeah.
it's not. And the other thing is as well is that really the mum will be the one sort of who suffers, because the baby will just draw everything from your body. So you
Yes.
can then end up being very depleted. And I mean, I don't know if you've heard this, but baby brain, where you forget stuff all the time.
Yes, totally.
Yeah,
I had that.
That's
Yeah.
been said because in the last trimester of pregnancy, the demand for DHA, which is an omega-3 fat, goes up a lot. So it's the baby needs it a lot in the first and the third trimesters. And if you don't eat enough in your diet, it takes it from your brain, and women's brains actually shrink. They can shrink in the third trimester. So and so that's sort of where baby brain comes from, really, because your brain is literally shrunk.
Oh no, I mean it makes perfect sense. I forgot my daughter's name when I after she was born, I was holding her in a little thing and people were like, "What's her name?" I was like, I cannot believe I just forgot my daughter's name. I'm so embarrassed.
That's so funny.
So
but that's it. And if you haven't supplemented, and then especially if you don't eat oily fish, then it's going to be a problem, really. So
yeah.
And then again, that's sometimes like women who come to see me with secondary infertility, it's often nutrient deficiencies because they've been through a pregnancy where they maybe didn't get all the nutrients that they needed. And then they've had a newborn, and all the demands that come with that means that you don't always nourish yourself in the best way, and that you maybe go back to eating quick and easy things. So you might go back to a more sort of convenience diet. And then you're not replenishing your body, and then you want to conceive again, and you just have your body just hasn't got the raw materials, really. So with a secondary infertility, I would always run a nutrient panel and have a look and see what's deficient. And I had one client actually who she came to see me, and she came for acupuncture, but I could really tell that it was just the diet was the problem. So she was having margarine on toast for breakfast, and then for lunch she wouldn't really have anything because she was a teacher, so she was really busy. And then she'd come home and she was vegetarian as well, and she'd come home in the evening and maybe just have like some tortilla wraps and some veggies. So she just wasn't. I said to her, how are you going to make a baby from what you're eating?
Yeah, you need proteins. That's like a
protein.
Huge, yeah.
Exactly. And luckily she ate eggs, and also she was willing to start eating fish. So we really just worked. And again, it took, she didn't want to have IVF or anything like that. So we did a good 6 months of really nourishing her with her diet, and she conceived naturally. 6 months later, once she'd replenished herself, and she just said to me, I feel so like I didn't realize I was running on complete empty.
Oh yeah.
And you don't, do you, when you're a mum? You just crack on, don't you?
You almost just get used to feeling exhausted all the time until you start changing it, and when you feel better, that's when you realize how bad you felt, but you almost don't feel it anymore because you just think it's normal.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that becomes your new normal, doesn't it?
Yeah, and also bone broth, that's another thing that's huge in Chinese medicine, but it really is so supportive in general, because that really, if you think about it, the bone marrow is where the stem cells, all the building blocks come from.
Yeah. And when you drink that broth, you're getting all those trace minerals, and like the glycine that I talked about, collagen. You're getting so much nutrition that you can't really get from other things.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing to have even as a drink in the day, just having that.
Sometimes I even say have it for breakfast on an empty stomach, just like
Yeah.
a bone, because it's liquid. It's easy
Yeah.
to digest, and it starts your day with good fats and the collagen, and yeah,
Yes,
it's
definitely.
great.
And people, I think the name isn't necessarily the best, because when you say bone broth, it doesn't sound like that appetizing, does it? I like
Right.
try to sort of say, oh, make yourself like this, a sort of stock. And in my book, actually, I've got a recipe so I've got some stock recipes in there, and then I've got a boosted stock, so it's got turmeric and ginger in it.
Nice.
And it's something that you can just sip throughout the day, like tea, really. But again, that's such a nourishing thing to have, and especially after you've had a baby as well.
Yes, exactly. That's a whole other thing to really nourish yourself after. So,
Mm.
yeah, this is great. I mean, we can obviously talk for hours, but
Yeah, I know.
yeah, but it's great information. Who knows? I might have you come back. I'm gonna check out also your recipe book, and I'm really happy I found you because I'm
Yes, I
excited to
followed you as
see
well.
the recipes and everything that you're working on. And so for people who do want to work with you, who do want to find your recipe book, how can they find you?
Yeah, so my book is available on Amazon, as they all are, aren't they? And my website, thefertilitykitchen.co.uk. So you can find me on there. I actually have a Facebook group as well, which is the Fertility Kitchen community. And that's the best place to come, because then you get to sort of meet me in there. I do regular lives, and if you've got questions and things, then I'm obviously in there happy to answer them. And then you can start exploring working with me either through that Facebook group or via my website. So that would be great.
That's fantastic. Well, I'm so happy that we met. I think that what you're doing is amazing.
Thank
And I
you.
think nutrition's been intriguing for me as well as an acupuncturist. I just really feel that it's so important. It's really at the heart of everything. Like the kitchen is
Yeah,
the heart of the home, and there's a reason for that. And it really is the heart of your life is
yeah,
nutrition.
it really is. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Charlotte, so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you, Michelle. It's been great chatting with you.
So that concludes today's episode. You can find all of the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to share and leave a review. Reviews mean everything to podcasters, and I really enjoy hearing from my listeners. You can also find me on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com or email me at info@thewholesomelotus.com. I love hearing from my listeners. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www.thewholesomelotus.com. I thank you so much for listening in and hope that you have a beautiful day.